morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that's joining us today. My name is Ali Hirji. I work at the AI Hub as well as the Durham College Center for Cybersecurity. And I'm joined today by some fascinating individuals who have powered innovation in the most unexpected places. You know, they say that what is now proven was then only imagined. These are folks with the imagination to take things to the next level and prove it. In a previous session that I was in, Mayor Sean Collier, Minister Rod Phillips, and MPP Khalid Rashid were very clear about the fact that we are in a time of great change. The winds of change are blowing. And with that said, some people can either build walls or some people can build windmills. These are folks who build windmills. So I'm not going to introduce them by myself. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Sherry, how about we start off with you?
Yes, thank you, Ali. Wow, that was a great introduction. So, you know, I'm CEO of Spark Center, and Spark Center really is one of Ontario's, you know, wonderful 17 regional innovation centers. And so I am the lucky lady who gets to spend my days when I'm not Zooming. When I'm normally in the office, I'm rubbing shoulders with the best and brightest, great startup innovators doing incredible things. And I always feel just incredibly lucky to spend my days with them.
Fantastic. Barb, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure, great. Yes, great introduction, Ali, and thanks for having me. So my name is Barb, Carra, President and CEO of Cybera. We are a not-for-profit research and education network agency in Alberta. And what that means for most people is that we run the core infrastructure networking backbone that connects universities to universities around the world as a starting point. So it's really part of a global network, and we have partners all across Canada and around the world to do this. But on top of that, not only do we just run infrastructure, we also tackle challenges such as digital divide. And how are we helping facilitate some of the challenges around rural and remote connectivity? We also talk often about digital literacy. And it's not enough just to bring connectivity to the end user, but then how do we engage them to enable innovation and think about things differently? And then the other big problem we tackle in terms of technology is how are we managing supply and demand? For example, so how do we deal with tech talent in our provinces? How do we grow those buckets of tech talent? And how do we work with all the agencies in our provinces to do that? So I think I'm here to bring some Alberta stories to the table. And I look forward to sharing some of those examples with everybody. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And I love the fact that we're able to weave in context from across Canada. And I'm pretty sure that given the multicultural ethic that all of our communities have, and some of the work happening at the Spark Center with the Startup Visa Program, et cetera, we can sort of weave that into the conversation too. Now, a lot of folks are probably wondering, you know, this is a cybersecurity AI-like conference and multiple partners coming together to run this. You know, what is, you know, the focus? You know, why are we talking about, you know, enabling innovation? And doesn't it seem a little bit of a misfit? But it's the infrastructure piece that really is one way in which I can make my argument why we're having this discussion here, which is a great segue to introduce Riaz. Riaz, you've been you know, at the forefront of building infrastructure for innovation and communities in Durham region. I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do for the next minute or so. Riaz?
Sure. Well, thanks a lot for having me here. Thanks, Anissa, for having me. So yeah, great introduction. Like you mentioned, I work for the region of Durham. It's a fairly large region for those who are not aware, and we have 8 area municipalities that are part of our region. And Barb, as you mentioned, there is a lot of digital divide within our region. So along the lakeshore, there's pretty decent connectivity, but if you go further north of Highway 7, it's very poor connectivity. So I've been basically brought in to implement the region's broadband strategy and help deliver connectivity in those areas where it currently doesn't exist or it's very poor. So I'm very fortunate to have support from a lot of departments within the region, as well as representatives from other area municipalities and public sector organizations. So my job is basically to bring all of the public sector organizations together to help bridge this digital divide.
Fantastic. And this is a great moment now to segue even further deeper into the regional partners that have come to the table. Anissa, this has been a challenging time for you. I'm sure you're hearing a lot from your local businesses and communities. And a message that I constantly hear from you is that anything's possible if you've got the nerve. And Anissa, you've certainly held strong and represented women in tech very strongly along with Sherry in the Durham region. So thank you for what you do. And Anissa, I'll have you talk a little bit about what you do at the city of Pickering and where Pickering stands in this current moment. Anissa?
Thank you, Elliot, so much, and the team at CyberX for giving us the opportunity to really collaborate and partner on this panel. My role is a Senior Economic Development Officer with the City of Pickering. In a nutshell, our goal is really to improve the quality of life for our residents and our businesses. So one way we do that is, of course, attracting and supporting our local businesses here in the area. And a big mandate of ours at the city is innovative community development. We understand the importance of having information technology in creating a more engaged, connected, and really inclusive environment. We understand that broadband and communication technology not only enhance the quality of life, but also generates economic growth and employment opportunities here in the city. With COVID-19, there's so many challenges our businesses are facing, and many are looking now as the economy is reopening on recovery plans. So I'm excited to hear about all the thought leaders here in the community today and the innovative entrepreneurs to hear about some of their ideas on how we can sort of take the positive out of this situation and learn and grow from it.
Thank you for that. Now, we did have one more panelist joining us from the town of Colbourne, Bolis Ibrahim. I think he is having some technical challenges, so I'll keep an eye out for this. Before we dive into the questions, and again, like I said, this will be an organic kind of discussion with action items, hopefully at the end. There are about 22 people who have come in through the alternative link and another 30 sitting through the broadcasting station. There's some divisions that happen there, which is fine. Leave that piece to me. As questions come in, I'll make sure that I stitch it into our conversations. I want to start off by, I know we had some general questions that we laid out, but I want to rework that a little bit based on what I've been hearing throughout the day. One of the comments that was made in a previous session was, creativity is when you think of something new. Innovation is when you do something new and you do it effectively. Sherry, I'll start off with you. Is that being in some of the rural communities and our eastern communities outside of the metropolis, how has it been for you in terms of encouraging innovation and encouraging new thought practices and process? What's the challenges been like for you, and what have you been seeing? Sherry, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ali, for that question. That's a great question. I actually think COVID has upended, maybe some stigma even that was surrounding rural innovation, because I actually live in a rural area, so I joke about the fact that social distancing is not a thing for me because I do it every day. It's just part of living in a rural place. So what became important really quickly from my perspective is accessibility, being able to communicate. We've been hearing interesting stories coming from our startups about how they're actually having better luck getting people to take their calls to talk about their product than they ever did before. And so I think, there is a great opportunity for innovators that are in rural areas to just stay put and innovate from their own backyard. And I'm guessing a question is going to come up about, broadband and how do we do that? I think that one of the maybe interim steps is through facilities like Spark, like Venture 13 in Coburg, Launch Lab in Kingston. We've got a new incubator coming into Ajax, and we've got 1855 in Whitby. And so you can see this whole interesting corridor developing east of the GTA, where we actually have the bandwidth. We've got, we're on the Orion network. We're connected to, the universities and colleges. And so it's not ideal to still have to go into some spot, but we're broadening the network of rural innovation centers. And I think that it's a great transition until we get those networks set up and people can really truly work from where they are in place.
Yeah, I'd like to use that as a platform to sort of welcome Barb into the conversation a little bit deeper. Barb, I know that like myself, you're a ferocious reader, and you're someone with books. You go to many places without moving a step. So I want to get your perspective as well, coming from the Alberta side as well. Cybera does a lot of work talking about rural connectivity, so on and so forth. How has it been for you to get this narrative going around, hey, in these non-metropolis kind of areas, getting innovation started? Because a lot of folks are just concerned with, hey, let's just keep the lights on and life is good. Barb, you are on mute, by the way. Yep.
Okay, I'm good to go. It's true. It's interesting. One of the roles that we play as a research education network partner, Sherry mentioned Orion,
Yep.
is that we're there really to facilitate and enable a lot of the times. And so we do very much often play a neutral technology enable role, which is we have a lot of networking expertise on staff. That's our core business, running the research education network. But really it comes down to what you do with that network that starts to matter. And how can you push the boundaries on that? So, in a lot of the meetings, as soon as this happened, we started getting calls really quickly saying, can you help us? We're struggling because we see a lot of our students, our teachers, our resources, if you think about the public sector aspect, are working from home and aren't able to do their jobs effectively due to some of those connectivity issues that we've been seeing outside of the more metropolis or urban-based areas. Now, that being said, so we often frame it as a digital divide problem. It's usually we're creating a situation where we have and have nots based on access to infrastructure and technology and systems and learning opportunities. Problem is, it's also based a little bit on affordability. So, one variable does not meet all. You can still see affordable connectivity issues within the major urban municipalities too. That being said, what's happening with COVID has actually created an opportunity to pool everybody's thoughts and digital need requirements to do a better job at advocating on behalf of the gaps that we're currently faced with. So we're taking that information, working with partners to talk about what they're struggling with, what they're faced with, taking that and advocating it with the provincial governments, with the federal government, the CRTC, because this is a way to try to impart some knowledge into the existing system to change how things are funded and recognize and think outside the box a little bit. So pushing the boundaries where we can, we're there not to make a profit. We're just there to enable the digital environment that we have to move forward towards.
I'll take that and rephrase it just a little bit. Think outside of the box, and where possible, I advocate for burning the box completely. Sherry has been someone who has advocated in our community that innovation is not set in stone. If anything, it's set in jello. And you have to be ready to embrace that uncertainty to a degree. Riaz, I know we had a structured conversation, but you folks are well-seasoned panelists, so on and so forth. I want to weave in questions because there are quite a few that are coming in from the platform. I'm going to weave them in and let's just enjoy the conversation that way. Riaz, one of the things that came up was this aspect of, okay, we're talking about innovation in our in our rural communities. And we'll get to the aspects of security and so on and so forth. The question that's come to me is, all right, we're being asked to invest in all of this broadband and technologies and 5G this and 5G that, but what's the ROI on this? And it's a tough question because Barb mentioned, we're not in it for profit, sure, but that doesn't hold true for everyone. Riaz, over to you, sir.
So yes, I think that's the prevailing thought, that the rural areas don't have the population density for large ISPs to go in and provide the infrastructure. That might be true for the large ISPs, but I have to tell you, by talking to a lot of the smaller regional ISPs and even startup ISPs over here in Durham, I see that they have the ability to do this. It's just that they're small businesses, so they don't necessarily have the cash flow to go and do multiple projects at the same time. Yep. But if you target individual communities, they absolutely have the urge, the desire to go in and build those networks. It's just how do we enable them to do more of this at scale? That's, I think, the conundrum that we're in. But absolutely, the smaller ISPs, the startups are more than willing to do this. It's just that we have so many communities that if you just rely on them to do this sequentially, it might take many years. So that's where we as a municipality and the feds and the province have to step in and see how can we incentivize them. Is it through subsidies? Is it through site sharing? There have to be programs to incentivize the smaller ISPs in a fair manner to roll out deployments in small communities.
And just on that point, Riaz, you've got, I know you've been with the region for about a year or so, but you've definitely got a bit of a fan following. You won't be able to see it on the Zoom because all of the conversations are coming to me through the app. But two folks have said, big up to yourself for bringing in broadband connectivity and investments to Clarington. So if you had a role to play in that in a year and a half, you've made a bit of a following there, which in my previous Orion years and working closely with Barb, I can tell you it takes quite a bit to get a fan following and people to appreciate that work. So good on you, Riaz. Anissa, I'm hoping that your video is working and that you can unmute. If you're having some technical challenges, let me know. But I think you're good to go.
I'm good to go.
Fantastic. So Anissa, there's a question that came in. It wasn't directed necessarily to you, but again, I'd like to bring that into our fabric. And that is, there are certain communities that may not sit in the metropolis, like you've got Pickering, for example, close to Toronto, but not that close either. It's 45 minutes to an hour. You folks have relatively decent broadband spread across, but there's more to this in terms of it's not just about here's some internet now, hey, go and innovate and make the world a better place, right? There are other aspects that go in with this. There's education, there's other knowledge transfers that have to happen. What's happening in the city of Pickering in order to tell the community, look, yes, you're not able to go into the office, etc., but you have the infrastructure with which to innovate. What are some of the steps that you're taking at the city?
Yeah, so at the city here, we're taking a couple of steps. One way is providing free laptops through our public library. Pickering Public Library is trying to loan out laptops to many of our residents to be able to stay connected, offering hotspots as well. So we're trying to make sure our operations have access to that support. As well, we're trying to stay connected through social media and make sure our residents are able to stay connected. So we're trying to create a framework and an infrastructure to make sure everyone has access to resources. That includes moving into that next level of connectivity and providing that support as well. So the first step, I would say, is just loaning out resources, devices, and laptops to residents that just don't have that, and right now are sort of secluded from the world and isolated.
Thank you for that. Anissa, just an FYI, there was a little bit of a lag in your in your voice, but I did try and reset something here. So I think you should be okay right now. I'll go back to Barb. So the question that came in is, okay, what we've been pushing towards, let's make sure that, we're able to get everyone into the innovation concept and become more inclusive of this. But the question that's come to, and I think we can piggyback between both Barb and Sherry is there really buy-in to this from the government perspective? And do they really believe in that rural innovation is where it's at and where things can happen? It's all fine. And the exact wording here is that it's all fine to just put a little pocket of money and say, hey, they started up an innovation cluster. But is there real buy-in to see it succeed? It's a tough one. Barb.
Yeah, that is a tough one. And I try to be as balanced as possible, but also recognizing that, a lot of the time I have to say, I don't think the government, and in this case, I'm just going to talk about provincial government, for example, in terms of larger policies within Alberta, it's not always, they don't have the relationships in place to always execute the how they get it done. So I'm going to say they have good intentions, but I feel like there's still a lack of federal provincial coordination on how to properly invest the funds in the right areas. And sometimes that legwork is missing when you think about it from a larger perspective to get the best benefit out of those investments. In part, engagement is a tough one. Also, in part, you're dealing with market forces and competition, not always an easy problem to solve when you're thinking about ISPs and investment across larger landscapes. And then, coordinating federal investments into provincial with matching funds, it depends on the champions and leaders that are there representing that initiative for your province at the time. I see a lot more movement at the local levels with the smaller municipalities and regional economic development areas in terms of them taking opportunities into their own hands to try to move their own situations forward, to be perfectly honest. We're seeing a lot of pop-up community initiatives around deploying mesh networks on First Nation communities. That's a really exciting thing to see. They're trying to take what they have in terms of community network and getting it to the home, because there's a lot of disconnects there still, and nobody will come in and help them solve that problem. So I think there's a lot of innovation in that space happening. They're paying attention and they're starting to drive it forward from the ground up. Which is great to see, but also I think we still need to push at the larger levels to come up with a coordinated plan, which in Alberta, we don't have a go-to provincial broadband framework or strategy. That's something that I'd love to see come into place, but I think how we get there is still up for debate. You were muted, Ali.
Someone had to do it, and it was me. So taking over from the conversation that you just made in terms of a framework, et cetera, and getting buy-in, so on and so forth. Sherry has been someone in our community who's, you know the line, right? That if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. She's someone who stood very strongly on the aspect of innovation in our communities. And I want to trust the same question to her is, how have you sort of navigated this aspect of getting government buy-in, of getting that more senior level buy-in with stuff that you're doing like with the Hive and the various other innovation initiatives, including the startup visa. Sherry?
Yeah. Do you know, Ali, it is challenging for sure. And I think, you know, when I stepped into the fray a couple of years ago now, you know, there might have been some naivety in terms of, you know, from my perspective is, you know, if I think it, I'm going to do it. so you know, the challenge is in coordinating multiple parties, right? And I'm not talking about municipal, provincial, federal. I'm talking about, you know, between municipalities, because unfortunately there is, and I understand it because it's a politicized environment where, you know, the councillors and the, you know, are held accountable to their constituents. So obviously they have to support their own local areas. But when you live in a region like Durham, where we have 8 municipalities, and I hope I got that number right, Anissa is shaking her head, yes. You know, and then we know that, you know, we have to work together. Like we really have to bring this thing together, because independently, we are individually too small. But getting that, you know, united front can be challenging. And what we've been doing, of course, as you know, at Spark, is we've been really extending beyond Durham region and out into the Eastern Ontario Innovation Corridor. And we've been, you know, widening our arms out to Kingston, where there's a partner, Rick, out there, and trying to really establish Eastern Ontario as the western side of Toronto has done with the Waterloo Toronto corridor. And we have all the right, you know, concepts in play. We have, you know, great universities. We've got great colleges. We've got incredible industry partners. We've got, you know, willing, you know, startups. We've got incubators, cells, everything. So just coordinating it and get everybody sort of swimming in the same direction is a challenge, but you know what, we're getting there. And I'm really happy to say that I'm very hopeful for what will come out of 2020 in spite of COVID.
Yeah. Now I
just had a comment to build up on that. So just building up on the dynamic between the federal and municipal level. So as everyone knows, the broad telecommunication in general is mandated by the federal government, CRTC specifically. They, as well intentioned as their plans are, their programming is, they don't have the ground level details of where broadband is needed. They try to publish some of the eligibility areas, and Barb, I'm sure you must have heard of the hexagon problem over there as well. Anyone who's dealing with broadband,
that's a big one. I used to be a mapper. I have a lot of problems with the hexagons.
Everyone who's dealing with broadband understands the hexagon problem. The reason it exists is because it's done by the federal government, and they have chunked up all of Canada in 25 square kilometer hexagons. And guess what? For a region like Durham, the 25 square kilometer is a pretty diverse area. There might be some parts within that hexagon that are well covered and many areas that are not well covered. But guess what? The federal government does not have the ability to drill down to the ground level and determine where it does not exist. So that's where they have to rely on the municipalities to collect their data and feed it to them. And that's exactly what we're doing in Durham. We're doing the survey. We're getting ground level details from each community, and not just the bandwidth, which is what the federal government is collecting. We're collecting details about what service providers, what technology, how much they're paying, how much they had to pay to set it up initially. So a lot of these data points are being captured at the municipal level, and we can feed this to the province and to the federal government to better inform their decision making. So I think that level of communication needs to happen between the feds and the province and the municipalities.
Absolutely, great point there, Riaz. And you know, this is quite fascinating that, you know, the final panel of the day, but amongst many others, is this one, because I've been on many of them and moderated quite a few, and it's all sort of coming together very neatly. There are a couple of themes here, which is, you know, cybersecurity is not just a technical aspect, The other point is about equality and equity. And I think, I really like the point and the analogy that you took about, swimming together and swimming in the same stream. Because the reality is that while we might be in the same ocean, we're definitely not all in the same boat. Some of us have yachts and some of us have rafts, and I've used this in other sessions as well. Now, in the session that I just finished, a comment was made about security and, it's the smart city conversation. And the comment was as follows: said that, it was Michael Castro who said, listen, man, prepare and prevent is far better from prepare and prevent is far better from let me get that right again. It was such a strong line. I have to get this correct. Yes, now I remember it. It was prepare and prevent is far better than repair and repent. And his concern is that as we move more and more of our economies and more of our communities online, we don't necessarily have the right security posture to protect them online. And a breach is not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen. So I have to ask this group here, and I'd like to start with Barb. Is that, how does this conversation on, we want to innovate, we want to bring more folks into the conversation, but how do you weave in making a secure framework for it? Barb?
So that's a great question. I'm not going to talk about the security technology aspect. I'm going to talk a little bit about more how do we educate people to understand the notions and concerns and how to protect their personal information.
Yep.
So for me, this comes down to the end user. So if we want to be innovative and we want to support digital literacy and computational literacy and put the power of engaging in the end user hands, whether that's students, whether that's teachers, whether that's entrepreneurs or businesses, there's a big education component too that's also missing, and we can't solve everybody's problem. So CIRA just did CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, just released a fabulous report about Canadians' concerns around the privacy of their own data. And this very much plays into the cybersecurity conversation, which is more and more people are recognizing they don't want their data to transfer across into the US border. And so if we start from an infrastructure perspective, we need to make sure our networks are transiting in Canada. Leverage the concept of internet exchanges, making sure those networks are secure and well-resourced, and those security firewalls or whatever the infrastructure needs to be in place is in place to protect the citizens that are using their devices. But it really comes down to education. A lot of people I don't think necessarily understand when they sign up for something or they open a new app on their device. And so as we make connectivity available, more people get more devices in their homes, they access more apps, they're putting their information out there that could at some point also, just aggregate or I guess add to the impact of cybersecurity threats on us as people. And I do think education is a big part of that.
Absolutely. And we always say, right, don't let your education come in the way of your learning. And this means that, as we start to innovate more and work in digital ecosystems, the groups that are impacted by it will change. For example, and Riaz and Anissa, I'll take this to you and then we'll go back to Sherry. Anissa, let's start off with you, for example. So one of the companies that we know innovating through digital tech in Durham region is Connects Health, as an example. And they're looking at, services to seniors and direct delivery of medications and free pharmacy deliveries, etc. So now seniors are being encouraged to put their details online, so on and so forth. iCare Home Health in Pickering is another good example. But do we have the right education programs in place and learning programs in place to ensure that our seniors, for example, can partake and benefit from this innovation, but do it effectively and safe? Anissa?
Agreed. I agree with Barb. It is up to the municipalities to educate our residents and our businesses as we lay out this infrastructure and this framework for them to become more engaged and connected. It is up to us to protect our residents and our businesses. And as part of the City of Pickering, as I said, we collaborate quite closely with our public library to offer free webinars and courses on cybersecurity, to partner with some of our local small businesses that offer these sort of cybersecurity courses. It's up to us to sort of engage them to make sure they're informed and they're educated and protected.
Thank you for that. And Riaz, we'll come to you now, sort of with where Anissa said, it's up to the municipalities. And part of your broadband strategy is, of course, broadband for innovation, broadband to bring us into 2020 and all of that stuff. But is security part of your narrative? Riaz?
I agree totally. I think the way it is right now, a lot of that responsibility is at the local municipal level to train, and it through their outreach programs, through the libraries. But I think there has to be a more concerted effort, either by the province or by the region. There has to be a certain minimum level of literacy required. It could be through the school boards, it could be through adult education, through the libraries, but there has to be a certain standard, minimum standard that is set for people to get online. And I think the region and the province should take a more proactive role in doing that. Of course, the delivery mechanisms will be at the municipal level at the libraries, but the curriculum per se has to be developed at a higher level and spread out that way.
I have to ask though, when you've all emphasized the role of municipalities in education, so on and so forth, and creating more safer usage of tech and all of that stuff. But there's a question that has sort of come in, and it has come in rather, and I want to change it just a little bit. So thank you for this question. I'll just weave it a little bit. And Sherry, I want to put this on your plate, and that is, over the recent past, we've seen, thanks to some of the work that we're doing at the DC Center for Cybersecurity and the partnerships that we've built at the Hub, our students, dare I say, although they're, I sound a little biased when I say this, but our students have got very comfortable with being uncomfortable. They've knocked on the doors of businesses, have brought them to Durham region, and have brought people out to talk, so on and so forth. The question that's come in is, and I'm sure Graham Berry from Net Mechanics is here will have a laugh, and I asked this as a entrepreneur in cybersecurity, is what are we doing in Durham region to tell companies that, hey, not only are we innovating locally, if you want to innovate from a cybersecurity perspective, this is the place to be. Sherry, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know that we were doing enough, but I'm seeing this great, kind of uprising of exactly this narrative, because, in the coming weeks, in fact, next week, Spark, in partnership with Durham College and Ontario Tech U, are putting on an AVEN, Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network. It's a program that we're working with. We'll be putting on a seminar about, sort of safe and smart cities. And, whenever you have that conversation, you are deep in the conversation about cybersecurity, because it takes it to a whole different level. And so for me, that's where I actually see tremendous growth opportunities. So, I was reached out to by a local innovator who has been in and out of touch with Spark for a while, and he put his hand up and said, "Hey, I've got some technology that we've been developing and perfecting, and I think it may play really nicely into this conversation." And I encouraged them, come out and sit in on these conversations, because they need to be had. The more people have them, the more it elevates this area of technology development. And so from my perspective, I think we're going to see a whole lot more of it. And I'm sure many of you, like myself, Spark is a small, regional innovation center, right? We're not downtown Toronto, Mars. And we've had directed hits in terms of hacks and spam and all kinds of things since COVID began, and it literally has just left my head spinning. I'm amazed. Yep. So I think it's thank you for the question. I think it's a really important question, and I think it's a massive opportunity for innovation coming.
Absolutely. And I know one or two of my students are on as well. And I know they know this is coming. I'm a huge Narcos fan on Netflix, so don't misconstrue that. And I like to throw in lines from Narcos all the time. And I won't name the person, but there's someone in Narcos that says, the best way to blind someone is to get their eyes open. And, when, your eyes are open, you're seeing all this innovation happening, you're seeing all these companies coming out. And then when you least expect it, your blind spots are hit. Barb, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on this aspect of, we've got all this innovation going, or we've got this conversation going around innovation. How can we get people to innovate in certain areas, or basically innovate in areas that they previously wouldn't have thought of? For example, the narrative in some of our communities might be agri-tech, but that's because that's their main resource sustenance. But how can we get them to think outside of the box and color outside of the lines, and to explore other areas for innovation? Barb?
So there's a couple things we've done in Alberta that I think that has sparked some interesting results that might be useful. One is we worked in partnership with our post-secondary universities and industries here in Calgary and Edmonton and around the region to run what we just called, and this was about innovation for data science and around some of the tech talent development we were seeing, because there's not a lot of tech. We're not in the same position as Ontario. We don't have the same tech talent corridor and opportunities here in Alberta, just due to history and how we've grown up over the years. So there's a significant gap in technology talent. So we ran a data science for Albertans internship type program. Now you could insert any sector or any problem into that. Ours was just around data science. And what we did was we asked industry partners and companies to come to the table with a data challenge. We had recent graduates or folks looking to reskill and retrain and shift their career to do something different, and put those people together in a room basically for a month with advisors from Amy, which is our local version of artificial intelligence organization. Like I think, I'm not sure what the Toronto one's called, Vector.
Correct.
Maybe?
The Vector Institute. Yep.
Or Mila in Montreal. So
Yep.
using us, using Amy, using some of the skill sets in our province, and put them to that challenge. Now, given that we're all living in a virtual world, that doesn't mean that type of experiment needs to stop. They don't need to be in a room together. They could still form teams and work on those challenges. At the end of the day, some of those students were hired by those companies. Those companies embedded data science into their business models. So it created new opportunities for those industry partners to see what data science could do and bring to their business models. You could do the same thing with security. We did the same thing with a health hackathon around COVID and response using the data around COVID. So if you're thinking about opportunity to bringing different groups together to start tackling that problem, right? And you put them all into a challenge, it's amazing what comes out of that. And that is an innovation opportunity I don't think we do enough of until we're presented with a particular problem we want to solve. Right now that's COVID, but I think cybersecurity could be that, we just need to get the data available for people to work on it. And what does that look like? What are the challenges we're trying to solve?
Barb, I'm voting you president of the world. Well said. These are some really, really important points. Now, I know we only have about 4 minutes left, and I do want to come to some closing comments. So we'll do the closing comments as some resources that are available to folks in your community. And we'll start off with Riaz. So Riaz, before I ask you about some resources that people can reach out to, I am going to put a bit of a complaint before you. So I live in Oshawa, and as of Wednesday afternoon, my internet was dropping packets repeatedly. As the lead of broadband in Durham region, I want you to look into this. I had to come to the command center today to do my sessions because my internet was dropping. I know it's not your fault, just pulling your leg there, but it's something to keep in mind. As North Oshawa, which we tend to talk about as Poshawa, we've had some significant issues when it comes to internet reliability and latency. And that just goes to show you, right? I think 10 kilometers north of our campus, we have folks still on satellite, yet we push the innovation narrative. Riaz, closing comments for you from the Durham region's perspective and Invest Durham. What do you have to say about the resources that are now available to folks in terms of innovating online, and what can they access if they want to shift their operations entirely online security? Riaz?
So what I would suggest is if there are innovators out there that want to make their services available, that are encountering barriers to entry, please approach us, talk to any of the ECDev folks, talk to BACD. Let's have that conversation. If there's any way that we as a region or the municipalities can help reduce the barriers for you to enter, we're more than willing to help. Just one case in point, one project that I'm working on right now is to see if we can set up a sandbox for IoT devices. So the municipality will set up like a network, and any startups that want to have services, that want to deploy services, they can literally come in, rent that space from us, try out the product, finalize their commercial model, and then when they're business ready, then we can start launching it. So please have the conversation with us, with Sherry. We're more than happy to entertain these conversations.
And hopefully once campus opens up, one of the initiatives that Dean Debbie from Applied Researchers is working on with us, along with her leads like Viva, Dr. Ruba, etc., is developing a cyber range within our campus facility where whatever you're developing, we would be willing to test and simulate in different environments. And I think this aspect of being able to simulate environments, etc., and test products, etc., will give us that edge when it comes to making sure that we've got technology that's out there that's also proven, tested to be secured. So Riaz, thank you for that. Anissa, closing comments in terms of it within the city of Pickering, what resources are available for folks looking to now in this COVID environment take their businesses online and also measure if they pass the security litmus test per se? Anissa?
Yeah, very similar to what Riaz stated. It's our job, so please do reach out to us. We're here to connect people to the resources that they need. As part of the Durham Economic Task Force, we have worked with Invest Durham and the other municipalities in Durham region to develop a landing page on our Invest Durham website related all towards COVID-19 and how to shift over towards digital transformation and towards online. So all the resources are accessible there. We all also act as sort of advisors for any businesses that are looking towards getting into online. So our team is here to help. As well, we connect with individuals like BACD, with Spark Center, with our makerspace to be able to provide entrepreneurs and innovators with the access to resources that they need. So I do encourage anyone who is interested in seeking your help to please reach out to us, and we can help guide them through some of those resources and support programs.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Anissa. Sherry, from your perspective now, in terms of enabling more innovation in our communities securely, what programs are available through Spark, and who should they be reaching out to if they want to connect?
Well, I mean, you know what, we're as a regional innovation center, we are, doing everything we can locally, but I think beyond local, we recognize that sometimes resources are needed, from the bigger centers. So of course, our relationship with any of the large innovation centers is there and solid, and we reach out to those partners all the time. We have, of course, really strong partnerships with Ontario Tech U and Durham College and Queens and all of these institutions and supporters, stakeholders. So I feel like what the best thing that people who are interested in understanding more, the best thing for them to do is to connect, because we can't help you if you don't connect. And I think the network of stakeholders within Durham region is incredibly tight. We've extended it out now to the Kingston area. So we will find those connections for you. We will find those resources for you. And the quickest way to do that is to put your hand up and say, I need help. You're muted.
Again, someone had to do it a second time, and it's me. I really do appreciate the fact, Sherry, that when we've had communities come into Durham region, visiting us from Brazil and wherever else have you. Of course, not right now, but prior to in BC, before Corona, in that era, we were bringing them to see the Center for Cybersecurity, and we were taking them to ISPR to look at the escape rooms and cybersecurity and VR, so on and so forth. And these are good initiatives to ensure that the cybersecurity conversation is staying relevant and top of mind as we move online. Barb, last comments to you, and I sort of want to just preface it with a bit of a narrative, which is, thank you, Barb, for always making sure that while you've been focused on the infrastructure part, you've always looked at how does infrastructure translate into something usable on the floor, on the ground, and partnerships that you've created with different hackathons through Cybera, different learning institutes, etc., always looking at how and what technology enables. In your perspective, what are some partnerships that you think people should be looking at in terms of, or haven't been looking at and should be in terms of empowering more innovation and effective innovation? Barb?
Well, I think in terms of wrapping things up, I would agree with everybody said. A lot of this is driven by connectivity, and it's not just connectivity of networks and infrastructure, it's connectivity of people and relationships. And that's the biggest role that we play, is that facilitation and enablement in a lot of cases, which is we don't need to own everything, but it's about connecting people to the right places for the right resources that they need to move themselves forward. And that's maybe one of the things that we try to do most of all. But I think it's all of our responsibilities to make sure that we're paying attention to what's happening at the levels of the CRTC, as Riaz mentioned, because a lot of that guides our future in terms of the decisions that are made there on access to infrastructure. And then the other thing I would think about is there are national programs in place, and I'll just put one out there, is there's a free national cloud environment called DARE, Digital Acceleration for Innovation Research, that pre-commercial companies and startups can get access to as a free resource to do test bed for innovation. There are a lot of existing programs out there that I think we could do a better job of making sure that they're visible to give people that leg up to get their businesses off the ground.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Barb. And, taking it all together, for us here at Durham College, I want to thank all of you for supporting us in all of the initiatives that we put out there and ensuring that we've been able to make both the AI conversation, yes, but also the conversation on cybersecurity at the front of everything that we do. The DC Center for Cybersecurity Innovation has been around since February, so we're relatively young. And to so quickly be at such important stages, to have seats at different advisories is important for us to represent our region, but more important that we now have a seat at the table. And I'm very proud of how far our students have come and humbled to represent them at this level and with such wonderful speakers. So thank you all for your time, for your energy, and more importantly, for your commitment to more secure innovation. I read a lot and I love books, and I like to close with a little quote from, I don't know if any of you have read this book by Arundhati Roy, The God of Small Things. If you haven't, please do. And she says, the secrets to the greatest stories is that there are no secrets. And I like the fact that you've always been very open about the way you've got it done and the way you've achieved what you've achieved. These are great points and a really great high on which to close this conference. So myself, on behalf of not only my team at Durham College, but also being the lead on the siberXchange advisory, on a personal note, being asked to lead that high a caliber of an advisory was an achievement, but more importantly, I realized that this was possible because of all of the support that we get from our community partners, from Durham region, but also now from Alberta. So Barb, it's all much appreciated. What I will say in closing is that all of these sessions are being recorded, and I believe the siberXchange team will put them into their templates and have them out within the next 2 weeks or so. I do apologize. I know that we were supposed to have a guest from Venture 13 in town of Colbourne, but was having some technical difficulties. So we'll bring in the conversation some other time. I wish you all good health, safety, and more importantly, continue to innovate the way that you are. I believe now that the conference is coming to an end and that there is a closing ceremony that is happening. From my end, I have to wrap up and head off to some other work and head back home. And hopefully my internet is working the way it should be, Riaz. I'm watching you. And in closing, if you do win that car, there is a rule that you hand over the car to me. And then that's about it, all right? Other than that, have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and I will see you all online or on social media or in other engagements in the coming future. Have a great weekend, and thank you to the 60-odd people that came in. We appreciate your attendance. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Ali. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.